Hello, hello. I am Rick Becker, and I'm going to be covering Governor Burgum's budget proposal that he gave on December 7th, 2022. I have watched it once through. I haven't analyzed it in detail. I haven't gone out and done a bunch of research. I don't have documents for point counterpoint. I just wanted to kind of go through this with you. People have asked me what I thought about it. Let's just go ahead and hit it. We'll bring him in here. He started a speech already. We'll get rolling.
Our strategy-driven executive budget leverages investments in infrastructure, community, economic development for the future, reduces taxes for workers now, while tackling our number one barrier to economic growth, our workforce challenge. Every company, every state is now competing for workforce. States will grow or prosper, or they will decline and shrink based on if they can attract and retain talent to live and work in their states. Today's workforce can choose which state they want to live in, and likely any job of their choosing will be there waiting for them. They get to choose their location first and the job second. This is a totally new environment. In this competitive environment, we are proposing an integrated and comprehensive workforce investment across all agencies and programs of $167 million. And as always, we must remember.
Let's just stop there for a second. So the best way to get people to come to North Dakota is to lower taxes. The best way to get businesses to come to North Dakota is to lower taxes and decrease regulation. For both, it's to keep government out of people's business, out of people's backyards, out of people's minds. We just want to be free to do our thing. When you can attract more businesses because of a regulatory and tax environment that is conducive to this type of thinking, people will come because of good jobs, good paying jobs, and they'll come hopefully also because of low taxes. There's a reason why North Dakota has a record population over these last few years, and that's because of what's been happening with energy industry, with the oil boom, with the job availability, with the increase in wages. They're coming for the money. People need to provide for themselves and their families and their posterity, and that's why they come. The idea behind thinking that government can act like a little puppet master, pick winners and losers and figure things out and control society as a whole, the economy as a whole, and micromanage in a manner to get people here is not going to work. Think about it. We've been trying to do it. Politicians have been trying to do it for many decades. This trouble getting a workforce is not new to North Dakota. We've had an out-migration problem. We've tried all of the stuff that Doug and other big government people are fans of, that they think will get people, and yet it didn't work. We weren't able to get people here until suddenly there was an oil boom and jobs and money were plentiful. So keep that in mind.
To measure our success, not by the inputs that go into state agency budgets, but rather by the outcomes.
Okay, that's key. He said we need to measure our success not by the inputs that go into state agency budgets, but by the outcomes. What he's telling us is don't think about how much money we're spending. Think about the outputs. Now, here's the key. We talk about government, elected officials talk about the intended outcome. You see, because government never looks, rarely, only when pushed, do they look to actually see what the outcome is historically. He's talking, typical big government people talk about what is the outcome that we want. And we are saying that if we do A, we're going to get outcome B. That's rarely how it works because it just so happens that government officials do not control the economy the way they think they can. They do not spend people's money as efficiently as people will on their own. There are so many factors that go into it. So I want to go back to this. He said, don't think about, don't worry, don't measure success by how much we're spending, how much we're giving to the agencies. Measure it by the outcomes that we say are going to happen. Okay, that's the setup. That's where he wants you to go.
To that end, over the past year, again, we've engaged in a comprehensive strategic planning process and a budgeting process where strategy drives the budgets, not the other way around. Budgeting in today's complex global environment is just super hard, and it's super complex, and it's full of challenges and opportunities. And North Dakota right now, on the plus side, is attracting a level of economic investment in value-added energy, value-added agriculture, technology, beyond anything we've ever seen in recent history. Tens of billions of dollars lined up to come into our state. In just over the last 2 years alone, in the soybean sector, of $1 billion of private sector investments in new soybean processing plants. However, we've also, on the hard to budget side, we've experienced a period of historically high inflation not seen in our country in 40 years. And inflation combined with this chronic and long-term workforce shortage in both the private and the public sectors, it creates new budgeting challenges that require
both of which are
innovative
caused by
solutions.
government. The
On the revenue side of budgeting,
inflation,
global
100%
instability,
caused
supply
by government,
uncertainty,
our government, state,
and U.S.
and
federal
federal
policies that are literally designed to try to kill the fossil fuels industry had this effect of sending oil prices skyrocketing, which for North Dakota generated an abundance of oil tax revenues. But also we were hit with high inflation as it drove up prices for goods and services, which in turn increased our sales tax revenue while also pushing up wages. Higher North Dakota oil prices also increased the income taxes that we receive from mineral royalty owners.
Right.
But as a result, our general fund revenues are running well ahead of the forecast that was issued just before you adjourned on your last regular session in April of 2021. When we look at this abundance of state tax revenue.
Let's pause here for just a second. He mentioned general fund, and I want to hit this now because I'm pretty sure he talks about general fund a lot in this speech. I don't want you to be fooled because the big spenders always talk about the general fund. It so happens that North Dakota spends a lot of money that's not in the general fund. They several years ago developed the Strategic Investment and Improvement Fund. I think it's what it is, or infrastructure, doesn't matter. SIF, they call it. And there's a huge amount of money in that. We commonly sort of think about the SIF fund as the general 2 fund. And so when he talks about general fund spending, it's only a small segment of our overall spending. But he and other big spenders present it as though it is the spending. Okay. In fact, I recall a few years back where Governor Burgum was talking about I think a decrease in spending. Even though state spending increased, he said that we decreased spending because he was only referring to the general fund spending. You see, you can take money out of the general fund, put it in the SIF fund, and still spend it, and your general fund spending doesn't go up. That's what big spending politicians do. So keep that in mind when we're talking general fund or not.
We must recognize that it comes at the expense of taxpayers who are paying more for goods and services and having to work longer hours to make ends meet. That's why it's so important, now more than ever, to both invest our dollars wisely for the future, but also quickly provide real, meaningful tax relief to all income earners.
Real and meaningful. Meaningful. We're going to talk about this. I know what he's going to be saying.
Well, our general fund budget has grown since 2017 when we worked together to reduce it. Again, that was an interesting time. We had to reduce the general fund by $1.7 billion, from $6 billion down to 4.3, or 28%. Historically, never.
And again, if you look at that graph, you're going to think to yourself, oh, our spending isn't that bad. It was real high in 2013, but we brought it down. It's been slowly coming up. That is not what our spending looks like. That's what general fund spending looks like. This is dishonesty.
But under today's proposed budget for the 2023 to 2025 general fund, amazingly, we're still spending $162 million less as a state in our general fund than we were 8 years ago, than we were 6 years ago when Brent and I took office. I doubt there's a state in the nation that has gone through the kind of economic growth that we have that is spending less in their general fund today. So again,
congratulations. Yeah. Congratulations, Doug, for intentionally misrepresenting to the voters, to the citizens of North Dakota, your spending. I mean, the blatant aspect there, he throws in general fund spending. I mean, amazing. North Dakota, through everything, has decreased, and its general fund spending. I guess not much more needs to be said. It's just so flagrant. It is just so flagrant. These dishonest politicians like Governor Doug Burgum, and it doesn't end.
Congratulations to this legislature for restrained and conservative spending.
Oh my God!
As we prepare for this budget.
Oh my God! So he's showing you the general fund spending, and it doesn't look that bad. And he has the gumption to congratulate the legislature for its restraint on spending. The legislature has not had any restraint on spending, nor has this governor or the preceding two governors had any restraint. We have spent every dollar that we believed would come in. Every dollar. That's why of the 2013 biennium spending, in the following biennium, we had to cut all over the place because we didn't have the money we thought we were going to have, because we spent every penny we thought we were going to have, and it turned out we were wrong. We spend every bit, and to lie and say we've had restraint because you're looking at general fund spending only is ridiculous. Imagine in your household, right? If your spouse were to say, honey, look how good I did this month. Last month, I spent $1,000 out of checking, and this month I only spent $800 out of checking. But then your spouse didn't tell you that they opened a second checking account and spent $1,000 out of that on top of the $800 out of the first account. Would you not say to your spouse, you're deceptive, you're lying, you're not respecting me, you're purposely misrepresenting your spending to me? Damn right you would. Thank you, Governor Burgum, for exemplifying to everyone listening to this how dishonest you are. Man, it drives me nuts. I got to go back to this here.
Budget, I'm pleased to report that our state's balance sheet has never been stronger. Oil tax revenues running 60% or $1.5 billion ahead of the legislative forecast from the spring of 2021. It's projected to end this biennium at over $6 billion, coming in very close to the record set back in 2013 and 15. And with 8 months left in the biennium, this current budget cycle is projected to yield the second highest oil tax collections for sure. We'll pass the previous second high before you adjourn.
$3 billion.
On the general fund side of revenues,
$3 billion
before tax types there, we're running 23% or $660 million ahead of forecast. If you dig deeper into that general fund revenues, it's across the board. Sales tax revenues up 16%, individual income tax 13% ahead. Corporate income tax revenues are remarkable, 128% above forecast. And those major tax types, those three plus motor vehicle excise taxes, were expected to collect
saying, oh my gosh,
more than $500 million more this biennium than last from those tax types. And it's more than the
last biennium. It's more than the previous
Our financial position, from a cash standpoint, super strong. $718 million in the budget stabilization fund, a projected $1.1 billion unassigned in the strategic investment and improvement fund, or SIF, which is basically our second general fund or another checking account.
Oh, what? Okay. I did not recall that he called it a second checking account. Okay. He's basically like, hey, look at this right hand, don't look at this left hand, kind of a thing. So I can't believe he just called it a second general fund and like a checking account. 1.1 billion is the projection for the end, right? So that means it's extra. We didn't spend it. And 1.4 billion in the general fund. You see what I'm talking about here. Then you have the budget stabilization fund, which is important because we didn't have enough after the 2013-15 debacle. And then you've got legacy fund earnings, which should be going back to the legacy fund unless you're going to spend it on something really good. But here we're looking at an overall huge amount of excess money at the end of the biennium. And he even said a second checking account. So Doug, if you're going to tell the people of North Dakota that we have a second checking account, why do you only talk about the one checking account?
Over $1.4 billion expected for the general fund ending balance on June 30 this next spring. And then, of course, on July 1, when we transfer in of the next thing, we transfer in the legacy earnings, $486 million. So you can literally add these numbers up and see that there'll be about $3 billion of cash in the accounts when we're starting this session, when we're starting the next fiscal year, next July 1st. When we think about budgeting going forward, you've heard this from us before in the spirit of transparency. We are once again proposing to use $1 billion in oil tax revenue in our general fund. We can get there a number of different ways. One way to get there is through the $400 million transfer from SIF and increasing our oil tax allocation revenue from $400 to $600 million. But the point really is that we have, for the last 12 years, included about $1 billion of oil tax revenue in the general fund. This used to be 25% of the general fund. Now it's less than 1/6. This is a reasonable and conservative amount and transparent in terms of how we're using oil tax revenue to fund our government. And while on the topic of transfers,
That has nothing
our revenues are strong enough that we've also got a proposal in here that we should not be needing to draw profits from the state mill and elevator or the Bank of North Dakota. We don't need them to fund other things. We don't need them to balance the general budget. You just heard me describe the huge ending balances that we're going to be having. And therefore, we propose a one-time pause in these profit transfers, allowing these state entities to reinvest their profits in their missions of service.
So you have the state mill and the state bank, and they make a bunch of profit, right? And so he's saying we have so much money, because normally, because they're state owned, right? If they make profit, which is off of you, the taxpayer, where else are they're that's where they're making their profit. The profit would typically go to the general fund for state spending. We transfer it over. He's saying we have so much money. Let's just let them keep the profit, and then they can just do stuff with it, right? They can just do what they need instead of, yes, let's go ahead and continue to bring their profit over for state spending, since it's state, the people of the state's money that is comprising the profit. And let's bring it over so that we can bring people's taxes down more. That would be the right thing to do.
Serving North Dakotans. And when they do that, if they transfer the money and we leave it in SIF or the general fund, it earns low interest checking account returns. If we leave the money in the bank and in the mill, they can go out and get 14-15% return on invested capital as they also work to deliver value for North Dakotans.
It's not a matter of.
So we recommend this smarter cash management approach also as when it comes to how we fill our rainy day fund, officially known as the Budget Stabilization Fund. Currently, this fund carries a maximum balance by law equal to 15% of all general fund appropriations, or for this biennium that we're in right now, the cap is $752 million. It's intended to be there on a rainy day fund in case we have a shortfall of revenues. Okay. But the current rules that
the rainy day fund is a misnomer in my opinion. It's not that rainy day is like, you can use it if you think you need it, something you weren't expecting. No, our budget stabilization fund is for when the shit hits the fan and you don't have enough money, like what happened in 2015. Actually, it's the budget we made in the 2015 session was way too much. So it's 2017, 2016 where the shit hit the fan. And we needed that. In fact, we needed much more than we had in the budget stabilization fund. Now, the budget stabilization fund is based on how much we spend. Our spending is up so high, so the budget stabilization fund needs to be higher because we are at higher risk of having issues when we're spending so much and we don't have enough for our, I would prefer to call it a crisis avoidance fund. Really, that's what it is, and not rainy day fund.
Mandate that 15% does not take into account the fact that now we've got a huge chunk of our general fund is actually K-12 education, and K-12 education also has its own rainy day fund. So we're double counting these reserves, which are then also held in these low interest bearing accounts. This matters in a period now when interest rates are higher. We're losing money every time we leave money in low interest bearing accounts. So we should streamline the budget stabilization fund by capping it at only 15% of the ongoing general fund appropriations. Eliminate that double counting. We still have
So
the K-12
he's trying to do
with their own
sleight of hand, where he wants to rationalize lowering the budget stabilization. And that's exactly what we got away from. Representative Delzer increased the amount percentage-wise of what it was so that we would be insured against having a crisis like we had in 2016, 2017. Burgum wants to decrease that. Why? Because he is so smart. He believes that he knows all the best things and gosh, we can make more money. The problem is when and I don't disagree. Of course, you can make more money by investing in as opposed to leaving it in a safer sort of savings account. But then it's not there when you need it in time of crisis. That's what you have to account for.
Rainy day fund, have it reserved. But you know what this would do? The combination of these two things, this would bring our stabilization fund down to $602 million. Next year, it would be as high as $880. This frees up $280 million of funding for all of you to be using for things that have a higher return on investment than our citizens. Then our citizens didn't want us to collect their taxes and then just sit on cash and put them in low interest bearing accounts. They expect us to manage that, those investments.
So yeah. Yes, Doug. So citizens didn't want the state to collect the taxes and have the money just sitting there in a low interest bearing account. No, in Doug's mind, the citizens want the state to take their money in the form of taxes and have it in a high interest account sitting there. That's what Doug's saying. That's what he's saying. Golly.
Investments wisely. So our proposed changes frees up capital, improves earnings on cash, and these changes are conservative and they're proactive, they're transparent, they avoid double counting, and they help our state institutions get higher returns for our citizens. For the next biennium, we're also project a general fund ending balance of $410 million. By the way, the current biennium, we were projecting an ending balance of 600. So this is one of the highest ending balances ever projected. Again, this is part of this conservative forecast. When we add the budget stabilization fund at the new cap level of 602 would mean we'd have available reserves of over $1 billion. With these backstops in place, we're proposing a general fund budget of just under $5.9 billion. The massive influx of federal and special funds, formula-driven increases, historic inflationary costs have pushed the overall two-year budget proposal to $18.4 billion. And with a high rate of inflation, creating higher operating costs, supply chain issues, workforce shortage, full of recruiting and compensation challenges, increased budgets are to be expected. Any business in our state understands that they're facing increased budget pressures. But we look around at other states and see what their total budget increases have been. Montana, for this year, 9.1%, 12.7% in Idaho, 11.6% in South Dakota. All of this are similar, right in the ballpark of what we have here in North Dakota on the top line for all of the federal, special, and general fund increase of 11.5%. But it's important to note that if those...
Wait a minute. Okay, here's another trick Doug is using. So he is comparing his increase in spending, what did he say, 11.5%, which is huge. And I'll tell you why it's huge in just a second here, but he wants to compare our increase in spending to our neighbors, right? And a lot of the increase in spending, some of the increase in spending comes from federal dollars because they jacked it up from COVID and all that spending. But what he's not saying is how much we have increased our spending year after year after year after year after year, and the other states haven't been, you see. So for them, just as an example, having an 11% increase after a 3% increase, after a 2% increase, after a 5% increase is way different than North Dakota putting on an 11% increase after a 20% increase, after a 15% increase, after a 30% increase. You see what I'm saying? An 11% increase on top of all of the other increases. You see, so there's no apples to apples in this. Doug, let's talk about the amount of spending increases since you've been governor, not just this time to last time. And let's compare ourselves to the surrounding states. Let's do that. I'll challenge you to that.
Those of you that think that that increase is too high, then 56% of this budget is driven by funding formulas that were established by the legislature to support education, long-term care, and Medicaid. So if people want to dig into those formulas, jump right in. There may be some opportunities there. Achieving meaningful permanent tax relief. We are so fortunate to be in the position that we're in to make investments in our state's future.
We are. There should have been huge
the
tax
bottom line
relief
is our
years
state
ago.
is doing just incredibly well. As I said at the beginning, we are blessed as a state compared to virtually every other state.
Yes,
but when our state is doing well, the citizens should also share.
Governor Burgum, this is your 7th year as governor. This is the first time you're showing concern for giving the citizens tax relief. I just want to throw that out there. Your 7th year, and now you're saying, hey, you know what? We should do meaningful tax relief. But you know what I say? Hey, listen, Governor Burgum, I am happy. It's better late than never. So let's see how meaningful, how substantial the tax relief is in light of the fact that we have billions and billions and billions of dollars laying around.
That prosperity. To accomplish this, our budget includes income tax relief that will eliminate the state individual income tax for 3 out of 5 taxpayers. Those who will still pay income tax, the top 40% of payers, will.
Okay. So let's talk about this for a second. I think this is good. As much as I'm not a fan of Governor Burgum's governance model, nor his style. People say I hate Governor Burgum. I don't hate him at all. I got along with him and liked him before. And just like I don't hate John Hoeven. I don't hate these guys. This is nothing personal. I don't like his style of governance. I don't like his philosophy. And in fact, I do hate his philosophy because it is not one of conservatism. It's one of globalism. However, I will praise him and agree with him on this tax relief. We desperately deserve tax relief. And I think going to a flat tax and lowering that tax rate is fantastic. It's fantastic. It's overdue. We in the legislature, we conservatives, wanted it years ago. I think it was Scott Lauser that put forth a moratorium so there'd be no income tax all the way back in 2013. I know he and many others had several other tax proposals for lowering the tax rate, making it a flat tax, or eliminating the income tax. So again, Governor Burgum, better late than never. Your 7th year, we do get this. But in your slide there, it says meaningful permanent tax relief. Meaningful. 3 out of 5 North Dakota taxpayers will not pay income tax. I think that's fantastic. But I don't want to blow smoke up people's butts here, okay? Let's be honest. You talked about being transparent. Well, let's be transparent with this. I will tell you that the lower income earners, the lower 3 out of 5 income earners in the state, if you average out what they make, I've done this. I got all the data while I was still a legislator. The average comes to be about $134, I think, $134. I'm thinking back now. I could be. Is it 100? Or is it 330? But regardless, I should have checked before I did this. But you know what? Some of the value in this is that it's spontaneous, right? Bottom line is, I think it's $135. Yes, it is, because the bottom fifth pays $0. The second fifth pays like around $100 and some dollars, and the third bottom fifth pays around $400 and some dollars. So we're looking at an average of about $135. So let's just be honest and transparent, Doug. These 3 out of 5, what they're saving on average is about $135. If I'm wrong, I'll correct that in another video.
See their liability reduced by roughly 1/4 to 1/2. This allows North Dakotans
That's true.
to
The top
keep
earners
more
are
of their
being
hard-earned
paid
money
tax relief,
to offset the expenses
25 to
that they're
50%
seeing with
cut in
inflation
taxes,
and
so
to invest in their families and
that's
in their
good. This is
communities.
good. This is very
Every
good.
North
This should
Dakota
pass.
income taxpayer will benefit from this
should
plan, which
pass.
is why it's called the Relief for All. It will make North Dakota the lowest flat tax state in the nation. Having just been at Governor's Association meeting, I know that everybody's trying to get on the list. Iowa's bragging about cutting theirs from 8.5% to try to get down to 5% to get on this list. Arizona's not on this list, but they just passed legislation that gets them down to 2.5%. So they're already, it hasn't even been implemented, and they're talking about being the lowest flat tax place in the nation. But what this does is it puts us on a path towards eventually zeroing out our individual income tax and joining these 8 states that don't have individual income tax. These include some of the nation's fastest growing states in the southern part of our country. They compete.
And again, I'll agree with Doug. I think this is, if we didn't have so much money, and if this wasn't so overdue, if it wasn't in his 7th year as governor that we're finally getting this, I would say, yes, I mean, this is awesome. Let's do this stepwise. We can eventually go to eliminating income tax like these other states that you see here. The problem is he's doing this stepwise fashion. Just do it. Just do it. Give actual big, substantial, meaningful relief. Meaningful relief. If you're going to do it, why in the world are we not one of those states with no income tax? I'd like to know that. We've got more money than all those. Alaska, of course, has more oil than us. Wyoming has great minerals. I don't know why we didn't do this years ago. We wanted to, but you know what? The big spenders didn't want it. And the big spenders, a lot of them think even this is too much. And most think, gosh, we have to decide, do we want to do this little bit of income tax relief or do we want to do property tax relief? We have to decide between the two. Governor Burgum, in fact, believes that. We can't do that. We have to decide between the two because it's just too much money. We can't let people keep more money, even though he just got done saying how many billions and billions and billions of dollars of extra money we have sitting around, but we can't do too much tax relief.
Those on this list who we compete for energy workers, like Alaska, Texas, and Wyoming. We keep directly for workers from those states, and also our neighbor in South Dakota. Getting on this list should be a priority for the state of North Dakota because if this relates back to attracting workforce. And it's not just private sector. Talk to General Al Dorman about how we're losing military personnel to other states that have zero income taxes. We're grateful to Tax Commissioner Brian Crocius, along with Representative Hedlund, Senator Meyer, Senator Kanianen, Representative Bosch, Representative Doctor, for their leadership on this really exciting proposal. This plan expands upon the income tax credit package passed by this body, which was introduced by Representative Heinert, which you approved in last November and was signed into law. We also signed legislation last session, thanks to the leadership of Majority Leader Hogue, that exempts Social Security from state income tax. This will provide an estimated $4.6 million in much-needed tax relief per biennium to North Dakota's approximately 20,000 retirees.
Yep, that's one of the
We
good
are
things
deeply
the
grateful to
did last time
legislators who
around.
supported last year's income tax packages to provide meaningful relief to our citizens.
not
The
meaningful,
proposal in
Doug.
front of you now will build upon that.
Golly. Just by the way, the tax relief last year, that was $350 per filer. Do you know that it started off at $500? But they miscalculated how much money the state wasn't going to get. And they thought that $500 for tax relief, Governor Burgum and select legislators thought that a $500 relief was going to cost too much. So they whittled it down to $350 and then passed it and then told you to be grateful and thankful that they were so beneficent that they did.
That relief and allow North Dakota working families to keep more of their paycheck in their pockets. To show working families that we understand their plight and that tax relief is a priority for this assembly, we urge you to expedite income tax relief legislation and make it one of the first bills to cross my desk.
I agree.
Now is the right time to provide meaningful, permanent income tax cut to make our state a more attractive place to live and work and a more attractive place for workers to move to. It's real reduction in
It's just that it's so
taxes, real
small.
reduction. It actually
It's
reduces the revenue coming into the state of North
just so
Dakota.
small.
It's going to help us retain both workers and military members, and it benefits us all. Let's get it done.